So we didn't have a meeting last week because I had to run to the eye doctor. Um, I guess that's yeah, that's all we got to say about that. And then the only updates I have is that I was playing with that Slack export thing, and I was having problems getting it to run. And finally, looking through enough of the issues on the GitHub and applying some of those, I did finally get the thing to run where I can say, uh, start up that program and run it against one of the exports, and it will create, let's see, how did that work? I think you just run it against the full export, and then it creates this big directory structure at each channel. So you've got like the general and the random, and we've got RTK and we've got common ECU. It creates a separate directory for each one of those. And then in that file, for each day that you had messages posted, there's a separate file for that. And if you go look at it, it's a real mess trying to decode all that. But this program actually, when you start it, it takes your export file that you give it, and it breaks all that out and goes out and actually fetches the images and puts them in a file. And when you're done, it pops up with a browser on your screen. And when you get the browser, it looks like Slack does. So on the left, it's got your multiple channels, and then on the right, it's got all your text and your stuff that goes back. And it turns out on when you run this, if you go into Slack and say do an export from the entire thing, it actually goes back to day one and when we started the Slack channel. So the messages go back that far. And I did find out that some of this, if you dig through there, it'll say, oh, this file, it's not available due to the date or due to limits or something like that. So it turns out it's still, if it goes back the 90-day limit that we have now, anything beyond before that, it was considered a file. I'm not sure what that means. If it's like a text file or probably anything, it's not a link to an image, because anything is like a link to an image, it still recovers those back to day one. But when you run this thing, it takes all if it's going to download images, it downloads those and puts them in that file. So if you go look at that directory that I put out there that's got my sample stuff, it'll say here's here's the name of the channel, a big long name that says random, or a big long channel that says general or whatever. And then there's another a directory called files for that particular thing. And in there, it's got a bunch of images, so you can go back and get the images from whatever will show up when you view that. Those images have been saved, and then anything that's these files. Apparently, if you got something new enough, they would be. I assume they would be in there. I guess I could go specifically check on that. So I did some experimentation. It does use the 90-day limit. I don't think it uses the 10,000 message limit that we ran into with ROS Agriculture. So the point is, if you go look at the stuff that I saved, it'll go back 90 days, and you'll see whatever it's called files, and then beyond that, it'll say no, you can't get those anymore because you're not paying for it. And I was trying to think how to move forward on that, if somebody wanted to keep this up to date, because they don't seem to have a way to run it and say, grab the entire thing back to day one and then come back a month later and run it again and append those. I don't see any way to append those together. So you'd probably just have to have little separate things as you move on. So once a month, you could have a new export file and then view that, because if you don't do this as you go along, then as I say, you go past that date, you're going to lose that information. So that's something else I was going to think about and say, is there a way to, or what's the best way to do that? To simply, have a calendar that says, once a month, just run this. Say, like at the first of the month, you could run it, and as long as those overlap, you won't lose stuff completely, but it's going to be a pain to have to, figure out which one do I want to go to figure out where to find the data. I suppose what you could do is each month you could run the entire thing again, because it was like a 1.1 megabyte file, I think, for the entire export. So it's not really that big with today's computers. So once a month you can just run the entire thing again, but you're still going to have, once it gets past that 90-day limit in that, then things are going to drop off the back end still. But then you can always back up to an older file and look at it that way. So that's just kind of where that's at right now. I got to the point where, yes, I can fire it up and it'll create these create I can create an HTML file of the whole thing and save that out of my directory. And but the thing is, you can't automatically switch from one channel to another. I might be able to go and edit the links and get that to work, but it's it's light years beyond what we had because we thought we'd lost everything at that point. And theoretically, I could go run this against the ROS Agriculture stuff because at one point Matt saved these off a year at a time, I think is what he did. And various people have played with the files and you can see some of the data. So if you go out to like Google Drive or somewhere, we've got some files where somebody has extracted that stuff and some of the stuff is there. But theoretically, I could run this program against that old stuff and possibly get useful stuff to show up there. And one problem with that was I think it was done by year, and it turns out that two of them are duplicates. So one of them said like 2018, one said 2019, but they're both the same year or something like that. There was something funny like that. So whatever, we've lost a big chunk of data there completely, unless unless we track down Matt, and if he stored that stuff from 5-6 years ago, maybe he would have that. But anyway, that's just kind of where that whole thing is. And other than that, I guess I haven't really done anything since 2 weeks ago. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Have you put any of that stuff on your Jeff Sampson website?
Yes, I did. That's the same place where the all that indexing stuff I was doing. I just started writing those files out. And if you back up on Slack, that message where I said, "Here, somebody go look at this and see if it works." That'll take you right to the two that are out there right now. Here, let me.
Have you noticed if any search engines have picked up on the data?
It so far it doesn't look like they have, and it could be I need to link it in because right now it's just a floating directory out there that's not connected into my whole web page structure. So it could be I just need to go put it on my main page, put a link that says this is the ROS Agriculture stuff that I'm doing. And then if that points to that directory, then maybe the search engine, kind of steps down the line to find all the stuff. So maybe that would do it. And I haven't tried that yet to see what that does. And that's where I found that other thing where, I was searching for, I cut a title out of my index and went to Google, or I was using DuckDuckGo and said, find this. And that's where all those things from that mowers.com was popping up. Now I thought it was an oddity. And I see I got everybody all excited about that. And I should have just ignored it, but it's just somebody that they're using someone else's information to draw more information to their page. And I don't know that it's necessarily would hurt us in any way. And I'm sure we couldn't stop it. So I just didn't care. I just thought it was an interesting thing that people are doing. And kind of like when you look at YouTube and you get all these people are making up pages and somebody says, oh, they're AI created pages. So it'll, take a bunch of crap and throw it together. And this thing would kind of narrate something just so you come watch their videos. And, they have to do very little work then at that point. So I think it's that kind of deal that's going on. I was trying to figure out, backing up here. That's not obvious, but somewhere in there, I just said, oh, I know I can't find it. I'm looking in Owl's private channel. That's why I can't find it. Back up here. I'll just post a link out to my directory, and if anybody wants to dig through that, you can just grab the HTML file. It's a big long thing that says Slack export this date to this date .html. If you open that, that gives you the thing. Okay, here it is on November 6th in Slack. Here, let me just do this. Share screen. Do this. That's not what I wanted. Huh. Are you seeing my Slack screen, or are you seeing this data sheet that I had posted?
I'm seeing Slack.
Okay, well, I'll quit moving stuff around here. I'm looking at my screen here. It's got the wrong stuff, but I see. Oh, that's probably what it is. So anyway, on November 6th, I just said somebody. If somebody's not busy, go try these, and those two links will take you directly to those two existing HTML files if people are just curious about what's going on here. And that's again, that's just out in my directory. That's the same directory that has the all the indexing stuff I've been doing. So it's under my ROS Agriculture directory, and that's where also if you go out to that directory and look, then it'll have a let me get this out of the way. So the first one says Slack exports, Slack space export random. So I guess I didn't give you the total data on that. And somewhere along the line, I specify like it says like January 2018 through whatever the date was. And I see that didn't make it through on this. It just simply says buried in there says random HTML or RTK HTML. So that just that's the two files that are there. And as I say, if we just once a month run that and replace those, you still got the problem of the 90-day old stuff disappears. So I'm not sure what to do that about that. But anyway, that's where the stuff is. If anybody wants to go look at that, and I'll put that the I'll put some of those links out in chat when we're done. Either a link to my main directory for this stuff, or I can put those in separately. So I don't know. We'll see what happens on that. That's all I got.
Well, on my side, share, share. I have a plot that I've been testing on. Let's see it's maybe 100 in course numbers. It's maybe 180 feet by 180 feet. And I've run that, and so have the GPS and the X and Y points for this polygon that is the outline of that. I've used some methodology called, probably not mispronouncing it, but Bostropheden, and created a number of line segments that cover that at a defined path width. They happen to use 0.9 meters based on the cutting pattern of my lawnmower, and I've been in the process of trying to create what I'll refer to as a continuous, I think the exact language is continuous curvature path, that would start at one end and go up and come down and go up and come down and go up and come down for that process. Previously in testing, I just ran a square pattern, sort of like that, down to here, down to here, down to here, and just kept working my way inward, and that would be fine too, except the landowner says, well, I normally cut it going up and down, which is cool. There's probably some efficiency there around making the fewest turns. But anyway, that's what I've been working on. And so the progress at this moment is, I take these lines, I trim off these lines that are disconnected and get down to a smaller pattern. It looks like that. So you can see, it finishes with a straight line and begins with a straight line. And then I've been trying to create something that will make turns at each of these ends. So I'm not quite there yet, but that's what I'm working on as an example. One of the sort of the game plan is, this is the same plot, and it's got 3 concentric rings going inside. So the game plan would be to run, these outer round lines in a circular fashion, and then switch over to the up and down approach. What you see here is there is an obstacle in the yard, and it's about right here, and this is a circle that I've plotted on here to try to think through, so how am I going to, work around that, um, obstacle. These numbers happen to just be at a 30-degree increment around that. So thinking, I'm coming in because I'm running clockwise, I'm going to be coming in from the right and going right to left. I'll be coming in this way. At this one, I'd want to go up this way. This green line actually would probably come down, and the blue line would come down too, to get back to the shortest path. Speaking of shortest path, I did use Dubin's stuff to do some of the calculations, and this is what it spit out in one of the processes. Oopsie daisy. Hide that. Make that a little larger. So you can see what it didn't quite like. You look at the endpoint. Here's an endpoint. Here's an endpoint. Here's an endpoint. So these lines effectively are longer. And when it tried to plan that, it's getting all of these. I mean, I'm sure they're algorithmically perfect, but from a cutting perspective, not something I really wanted to do. So anyway, that's been a bit of a challenge to figure out how to basically create a path that will run a continuous curve along each of those line segments. At the moment, this looks a little disjointed, but in Slack I posted the picture of getting that resolved. It took some hand building to make all that smooth. And the reason why there's a bigger gap between these is because one of the calculations was ending up with 2 points very close to each other instead of separated. So I think I've worked through that. Bottom line is I can't find anybody who's really done a continuous curvature path. You've been using Dubin's and this bootstrapping process for an Ackerman vehicle, so I've been sort of fumbling my way through doing it myself, and that's where I'm at. Back to Zoom.
Did you look at my last comment that I posted after all that?
Yes. That's why I mentioned what the actual results were in trying to use that with lines that are separated. I mean, these were the results that I got. If I go back and share again. I mean, your mileage may differ, but with these numbers for my points, I was getting, this peculiar, well, it's not peculiar. I'm sure it's doing exactly what it's programmed to do, but
Was that waypoint file, is that X, Y, and theta over there on the right?
yeah, this was the input. This was input on the right, output on the left.
Those theta numbers should either be 1.9 or 5.0. You should have two numbers there. You can't have multiple theta numbers there. Whatever your angle, I think you said 19 degrees. So going up, that theta should be 19 degrees. When you come back down, it's whatever whatever the opposite of 19 degrees is. So if you
Yeah, I
back
can.
back up to that original picture you had that showed your perimeter and you had the red dots, probably that one.
This.
Yeah. So are the red dots, is that what the points the Boaster feeding thing put out?
No, it only gives you the blue lines. It gives you the line segments.
So
The red dots are.
if you take those blue lines, take the endpoint of each one of those, I assume you either know what those are, I can calculate the XY point of an endpoint, and the angle is if you're going up, it's going to be the 19 degrees, and if you're going back down, it's going to be whatever 180 degrees from that is. And you feed that in, it should work. But I can see why your thing you created was wrong because all your headings are seem to be all over the place for whatever reason.
Yeah, I can go back and try that.
Because I think it,
.04.
as I said in that last post, I said if you just run your Boaster feed and take the endpoints and put those directly in your waypoint file, and then say run that against the original generate points, that should give you your lines. You have your parallel lines. When it gets to the end, it will turn around. It may not be, they aren't going to be as bizarre as what you're showing there because somehow you messed up your headings there. That's why it made those look so stupid. But it's going to be roughly your light bulb shape. It just won't be quite as symmetrical as you might like. And the whole point is if you're doing, because basically you just need to turn around, and when you do, then you just need your headland area out the outside. So if you take your full perimeter and then cut it down, that's where you showed you three concentric circles there. Just take the inside one to run against that, then that leaves the area at the outside of that. So you can do whatever it takes to turn around. Just make that big enough. You got area there, and then just drive around when you're done and cut the outside, and that'll clean all that stuff up. But I think, yeah, I think you're making it way too hard here. You just need to take, as soon as you run the Boaster feeding thing, take the endpoints and put them right into your waypoint file, and then get the correct heading, either the heading up or the heading down. And I think that will do it.
Give that a go.
On this Boaster feeding thing, did it pick that 19 degrees, or does it let you specify what angle you want to go on that?
Um, so I wrote the program, and it lets you choose the. It lets you choose the program lets you choose the angle, and then
Because if
I.
it's simple enough to specify an angle, then like people like to go out and do their crosshatch pattern. They'll mow it one direction one time, and the next week they mow it the other direction. You could just easily just split that number, and say right now they're kind of going up and down like that. You can come back next time and give them a 45 degree from that or 90 degree from that, and then theoretically, as long as those endpoints, you just take those endpoints and create the path off that, then that should be a fairly simple process. The other thing that occurred to
Yeah,
me
I
was,
just created this. I adjusted the angles until it got to basically be perpendicular to this. I'll just call it the southern border.
okay.
Um,
Okay. And another thing that occurred to me was if you're running the multiple concentric circles, as say if we consider that your outside pattern right now, and you come in two or three or four uh, uh, widths, it's going to trim off a lot of the stuff on you got those convex shapes there, what's doing the little short lines. Basically, if you move that in far enough, most of those go away anyway, and then they can be cleaned up as you come around and do your final passes and do your concentric um, circles around the whole thing. Now that thing with that little circle, I think you're going to have to just modify your original perimeter to fix that one.
yeah, I mean, what I was planning on doing is how would I hand build that, and then once I hand build it, try to figure out how to automate that.
So in this case, if you were to just make your perimeter, so when it sees that coming, it just simply puts a big notch and comes inside of that and doesn't try to drive up close to that. And when you're done, you know where the center of that thing is. Just tell it to start driving in circles around that. I know when I go out and mow the yard of riding lawnmower, if I have a tree, I'll come up to the tree and just crank it and just drive as close to the tree around and just make, several spirals around until it gets bigger and bigger, and then that cleans up the area around it. So you could do the same thing here to just keep driving around until you've cleared whatever spot you left, because you've got your perimeter notches in there, and just to avoid that completely. I guess you could do that. Um, well, that thing you showed, that was called something precision mule. Is that what that was called? And I know he was
Yes,
playing around
my
with it,
paradigm.
and he was saying, "Well, I got a tree here," so he was just moving his points around. So basically, he was just leaving a big hole out in the middle wherever his tree or his rock or whatever was, and that I don't know if he's automatically cleaning it up later or he comes back with manually drives around to clean those up. But that's so you got several different ways to do that.
Yeah, it's all part of the. I mean, the mechanics was one thing, and pure pursuit is still not perfect, right? It's still limited to something under 0.75 meters a second. Um, um, but I'll live with that for the time being and spend now time on how do you actually create a path that's usable. Always something. That's all I got.
What happened to my stop recording button? There it is. Okay, so I'll stop it now.